On the first morning of the new term, the lecture hall burned with quiet heat. Dragons filled the rising rows of stone benches. Wings brushed against carved pillars. Tails curled around chair legs. Low fire shimmered in the air as nerves and pride mixed together. At the very back sat Kale. He folded his wings tight against his spine so they would not touch anyone. His scales were bronze, but not the bright polished bronze of noble bloodlines. His were muted, dull, easy to overlook in shadow. He preferred the last seat beside the wall where no one had to sit near him unless they wished to. No one ever wished to. Kale was born without a crest. Among dragons, a crest marked heritage and strength. It flared with color during strong emotion. It drew attention. His head was smooth and bare. From hatchling days he learned to step aside and lower his gaze. He mastered silence before he mastered flight. The professor arrived in a ripple of blue flame. Conversations died at once. Names were called. Students shifted to sit with friends and allies. The hall filled row by row. Only one seat remained empty, the one beside Kale. He stared at the blank desk before him. This was familiar. Safe, invisible. Then the great doors opened again. A human entered. She was smaller than everyone in the room, yet she walked with steady steps. She wore the academy jacket modified without wing slits. Her dark hair was tied back. Her eyes moved across the hall with open curiosity instead of fear. Whispers rose like smoke. Humans rarely studied inside the Draconic Academy. The alliance between species was new and fragile. Many dragons still carried memories of old wars. The humans searched for a seat. There were none left, except one. She walked down the center steps. Boots tapped against stone. The sound seemed loud in Kale's ears. She reached his row and stopped beside the empty chair. She smiled at him as if he were not the least desired option in the room. "Is this seat free?" Her voice was calm. Kale blinked. No one had asked him that before. "Yes," he answered. His voice came out rough from disuse. She slid into the seat and set her bag down. "I am Myra," she said. "I hope I am not late." "You are not," Kale replied. She nodded and faced forward as the lecture began. Professor Arcturus spoke about historical conflicts between dragons and humans. He described fear on both sides, pride that refused to bend, battles that began from misunderstanding and grew into centuries of distance. Mira wrote notes quickly. After a few minutes, she glanced at Kale's empty page. "You are not writing," she whispered. "I remember," he said. "All of it." "Yes." She studied him for a second. Not with doubt, with interest. "That is impressive," she murmured. He looked away. No one had ever used that word for him. When class ended, students gathered in groups. They avoided brushing against Mira. They avoided looking at Kale. Mira stood and adjusted her bag. "Do you know where the library is?" she asked. "Yes." "Would you show me?" He hesitated. Walking beside someone drew attention. Attention led to judgment, but she was waiting without impatience. "Yes," he said again. They walked through high corridors, carved with images of dragon heroes and ancient flames. Mira slowed often to look at the art. "Your history is everywhere," she said. "It is important to remember." Kale replied, "So is writing new history." She answered lightly. He did not know how to respond. At the library doors, she stopped. "Thank you." "Kale," he paused. "You remember my name. You told me," she said simply. "Why would I forget?" Over the following weeks, she continued to sit beside him. Each morning, she greeted him with the same easy smile. Each lecture, she asked questions. Some were about strategy or magic. Others were about dragon customs. Why do dragons prefer high ceilings? For flight and comfort, do scales change color often? Only with strong emotion do yours. He shook his head, rarely. She wrote that down, as if it mattered. Other dragons noticed. A noble student named Cirith approached Mira one afternoon. You sit beside him every class, Cirith said, his golden crest glowing faintly. There are better alliances. Mira tilted her head. I chose my seat because it was empty, she replied. Cirith glanced at Kale with thinly veiled dismissal before walking away. Kale felt heat stir in his chest. You should not anger him, he said. Quietly, I did not anger him, she answered. I disagreed with him. Their first major assignment paired students at random. When Professor Arcturus announced that Mira and Kale would work together, a ripple of whispers crossed the hall. Myra grinned. That makes things simple, she said. Their task was to design a cooperative defense plan for a border town shared by dragons and humans. They met in the library. Kale spread maps carefully across the table. Aerial patrols here, he said. Ground units along this ridge. Mira leaned closer. What if the threat is panic instead of invasion? He frowned slightly. Explain. If fear spreads among citizens, soldiers cannot solve it alone. How do we prevent that? He considered her words. Clear communication, he said slowly. Shared leadership. Exactly. They worked for hours. Kale found himself speaking more than he ever had in class. Mira listened without interruption. She challenged ideas without mocking them. When their hands brushed over the same map edge, he pulled back quickly. She did not seem to notice. On presentation day, many groups proposed strategies built on dominance and overwhelming force. When it was their turn, Myra began. Our plan is built on trust, she said. Murmurs followed. Kale continued. Defense without understanding creates future enemies. We propose mixed patrol units and shared councils. Myra added, cultural festivals and joint training. Transparency prevents rumors from becoming weapons. When they finished, the hall was quiet. Professor Arcturus studied them. This approach requires courage, he said, and patience. He marked their project with the highest distinction rune. After class, several students approached them with questions instead of criticism. Even Cirith watched with a more thoughtful expression. One afternoon, during a practical exercise, an alarm rang through the lower arena. A training construct malfunctioned. Flames burst outward uncontrolled. Smoke thickened rapidly. Students rushed for exits. Kale felt his old instinct to retreat, to remain unseen. Then he heard coughing behind him. Myra had fallen when the crowd surged. Without thinking, he spread his wings wide and crouched over her to shield her from falling debris. Can you stand? He asked. Yes, she rasped. He helped her up. Instead of fleeing, he looked toward the control panel that regulated the construct. He remembered every lecture about its design. Myra, he said, tell me the sequence. She squinted through smoke. Second lever left. Then press the red rune. He moved quickly. Heat scorched his scales, but he ignored it. He followed her directions precisely. The machine powered down. Flames died into harmless sparks. Faculty rushed in moments later. Who shut it down? Professor Arcturus demanded. Myra stepped forward and nodded toward Kale. He did. The professor's gaze settled on Kale. Excellent control, he said. You prevented serious harm. By evening, the story had spread across the academy. The bronze dragon, without a crest, had acted without hesitation. The human had guided him through smoke without fear. The next morning, the seat beside Kale was no longer empty when he arrived. 2 dragons nodded in greeting. One asked if he would review notes together later. Mira arrived last and paused. When she saw the change, "It seems you are in demand," she said softly. Kale felt warmth beneath his scales that had nothing to do with fire. "They notice you now," she added. He considered that. "They noticed us," he replied. The term progressed. Discussions grew more balanced. Dragons who once dismissed human perspectives began asking questions. Humans who visited the academy felt less watched and more welcomed. Kale no longer chose the back row. He sat nearer the center where debate was strongest. When he spoke, others listened. When others spoke, he answered thoughtfully. His scales did not blaze with color. His head remained smooth and crestless, yet he no longer felt small. On the final day of the term, Professor Arcturus addressed the class. "This academy was built on strength," he said. "But strength alone is not survival. Understanding is the greater power." His gaze moved across dragons and humans alike. The simplest choices can reshape history. A word, a partnership, a seat freely given. Kale glanced at Mira after the ceremony. Students gathered in the courtyard. Some prepared to return to distant territories for recess. Mira adjusted the strap of her travel bag. "I will return next term," she said. "If they allow me, they will," Kale answered. She studied him carefully. "You are different from the first day." "How?" "You stand taller." He thought about the empty seat that had once been his shield. "I was waiting," he said quietly. "For what?" "For someone who did not see me as empty space." Mira smiled. "I only saw an open seat." "It changed everything," he replied. She extended her hand. He clasped it gently with careful claws. "Save me a seat next term," she said. "I will," he promised. As she walked toward the gates, several students called Kale's name. They invited him to join study groups and planning circles. He answered with calm confidence. Above him, the sky stretched wide and bright. For the first time, he opened his wings fully. In the center of the courtyard, without fear of judgment, sunlight touched his bronze scales. They did not glow. They did not need to. He was no longer invisible. He had simply been waiting for someone brave enough to sit beside him